Hey folks, I have not set up my screen or anything. My thought was I would just sit here and code and then wait for questions. Although I already have a question, which is great. How's everybody doing? I see Osama? Ozama? So forgive me. I have a question already, which is great, so I'll answer that. Hi, Kevin. From your perspective, if someone wants to contribute to Dart's ecosystem, what area needs work but is lacking attention in terms of packages, learning resources, etc.? That is a great question. Oh, this is wonderful. I can like wax poetic and pretend I'm share some wisdom. My experience here in all these things, you enter an ecosystem where you think an ecosystem is interesting and you're like, oh, how can I help? And you want to pick a shovel and just like walk around and find a hole that needs digging. The big thing I would recommend is find a hole you care about. Like build something yourself that's real and dig there, help there. And then as you do that, you'll run into stuff and then help fix those things. It's Osama. Okay, cool. Thanks for the clarification. And I hope that makes sense. So you see people who are like, oh, I want to help with Dart. I had this thing for a while where like when I left Microsoft, I got into all the open source stuff, and I was, I was just traded in my Windows machine for a Mac, and I was like, oh, I'm going to be a kernel contributor to Linux kernel. Like that just seemed like a cool thing to do. And of course, the bar there is super high, and I wasn't spending time like writing drivers or anything crazy that was like deep in the Linux kernel. Like I wasn't doing any of that work. And somehow I was like, oh, I'm going to like start submitting patches. Like I was so removed from that work that for me to say, oh, I'm going to start doing that is insane. And so what I did was I started working with Rails, Ruby on Rails, and I started, installing the packages in the Rails ecosystem. And then I discovered I really wanted to know what the hierarchy of all the packages was and how they depended on each other. And so I made, if you guys have seen PubViz, I made that for Ruby Gems. And actually, it's in Bundler now. You actually go look at, I think it's called Bundle Viz right now. So it actually got into Bundle. YCats like it, installed it. And so it was very related to the work I wanted to do. And it was a problem I was hitting. And so that's my recommendation. Don't just say like, oh, I'm going to start looking through bugs in the SDK and try to fix an I/O bug. Now, if you're writing a server app and you know C++ and you find an issue, and you're like, oh, it's not parsing HTTP headers correctly, then sure, and you have very good context there. But don't just go pick up something random. Like, go build something real yourself, because then you have a better perspective on it. It's kind of my recommendation. I hope that was useful and interesting. I'm going to see if I have any notifications here. Oh, cool. Just retweets. What I'm going to do is I'm actually working on something, and it was something that something I mentioned a little bit is the function framework work. There's something I want to tweak in there. So I'm going to get my displays set up here so I can have my video, my recording screen, and questions somewhere on the side here that I can see easily. And then I can have other stuff here. Oh, people are like, what time zone? Yeah. So let me move Windows over here. And that's a great question, Osama. If that's helpful, let me know. And if you have other questions, let me know. I'm going to start coding here, I think. Let me close all the windows for stuff that I'm not working on. That's all good. So they become very aware of like your random chat windows and your email, and like what's all the stuff I don't necessarily want folks seeing. I'm jumping around here. Give me a couple seconds here. Thanks to the Shelf ecosystem from Samir. You're so welcome. I didn't make the ecosystem. And this is one of those lessons too, right? I didn't make the ecosystem, but I did realize after, again, shameless copying, the Ruby world with Rack and the Node world had, what's it called, Express. I realized very early that having a very small, tight, minimally opinionated base layer that people could build on was the best thing to have. And again, Natalie actually did most of the work. She, that poor woman, had to review all of my code, and going through those code reviews initially for Shelf was miserable because she had very good feedback, but it was a lot of feedback to get it right. What we ended up with is hopefully a very tight little thing that lots of people can build on. And so let's build an ecosystem of those things together, right? I think I've made 2 Shelf packages that are public and used. Maybe. I don't even know there's 2, maybe just 1. Maybe just worked on Shelf. I've submitted pull requests to Shelf Static and Shelf Router. I've helped a little bit there. But most of it's the community. So we build the ecosystem together. Let me get my screen share going here. Let me change the resolution. I'm not going to try to stream at 4K because I like you nice folks. So let me get my display resolution down just a tiny bit. And then I'll try really hard to be productive. You know that this is done with a great amount of love because making me code at a lower resolution is painful. Share screen. Screen 1. Okay. I'm working on the function framework, which is super exciting. And there's going to be a lot of just hemming and hawing, and I probably need quite a bit, unless I see questions. So feel free to chime in. I might ignore a question. I'm paying most attention to the YouTube comment thread. So if you guys want to plug in there, do the YouTube comments. Following Twitter is going to be a little bit more tough. I'm actually, and selfishly, there's 5 people watching. Okay. Hello, the 5 viewers that are watching. Say hi at least. I'm just going to code. So I wanted to talk about where we are and things. We got version 4 out of the function framework. 0.4. What day was that? March 21st. So Monday, we got version 0.4 out. Me and Tony, and he did a bunch of great work getting the examples updated. Hi, Simon. Hi, VGB folks. Awesome. And it's a monorepo, and I should explain. Actually, it's kind of cool to just explain. This is a very common pattern that we use through a bunch of stuff. So I'm assuming everyone can see my screen here. Let me maximize that. I can up font sizes a little bit, but I'd rather not. So let me know if it's tough. You might just watch me full screen or just listen to my rambling. So we set up a monorepo, and a monorepo, the way I think most people that use the term monorepo, it's funny because all repos are monorepos. It's one repo. But what this means is you have multiple packages in one repo. So you'll notice there is no package at the root of this repo. This is the repo, function framework Dart. And inside it, we have, this is the core thing, is we have the library that you use at runtime, and then the build thing. And so you will see this all over. JSON serializable, it's a monorepo. And there's a JSON annotation is the runtime thing, and also the annotations. And there is the builder. And then what's also nice about this is you can layer in other things. So there's another public package here called Dart.fn, and that is the that's some build tools that can scaffold a function for you. Tony's done most of that work. I actually haven't paid much attention there. That works really well. We have a bunch of other examples, and we have some tests that are outside of those other things. So this is a great way to structure these projects. And then what you do, and this is a convention I'm trying to push, is we'll push the runtime thing first because the builder depends on that. You publish that, and then so you get rid of your dependency overrides and things, and then you publish the builder. And the builder, you can push a PR on that thing, and you remove the path dependency, and you do a normal dependency because it's now published, and then you publish that. So there's this kind of rolling thing you do. And in fact, if you look at the functions framework Dart repo, I think we have docs. Do we have a doc even in here? Yeah. We have the release process in here that explains how we do it. And actually, we try to follow along the Dart model for releasing external packages. So that's how we do it. So what am I working on right now? It's actually kind of fun to talk through all this. Right now we have a typed event. So where am I going? Let me show you the diffs. And again, this code is really small. Right now we have a cloud event type, and the data type in it used to be object question mark, because it could be anything. And I'm now changing it to T, which means it still can be anything. But also, while it is anything, I want to allow you to define it explicitly. And so where I'm going with this is, let me show you an example. Cloud event type. Oh, that's a test. Let me find a function that we built. Maybe just in here. This is all the fun. This is the stuff people don't realize. It just takes a lot of work. You know, when you write these builders, it's like, oh, I want to be able to support defining libraries, you know, function handlers in a library that's exported, and then still generate the right server code. So you see, like, this handler, this server, the test example, has a bunch of functions. And some of these are actually defined in functions that are exported here. So when we do code generation, when we dig through the library looking for, you know, we have to, you know, take care to go dig through the exports to find things. And so the work that people just take for granted. But what I'm working on now, and I'll show you, is right now you can define a handler that takes a cloud event, which is great. What I want to support is really say, I want a cloud event of customer, or more example, pub/sub. I want to take a cloud event of pub/sub. And what this will do is it'll actually make sure that when the event called, not only does it new up a cloud event, it news up a cloud event of that generic type. And it will make sure that the content of the cloud event actually matches that generic type and passes it through. That's kind of the crazy world I'm going through. Oh, and it says it's blurry. Oh, thank you. It says it's blurry because I'm streaming at 720. Could I up the rate? You know what? I don't know if I can up the rate. I don't know if StreamYard will let me. I can do this to make the layout full screen, because it doesn't seem to be a way to let me. And I'll keep in mind that the StreamYard logo is right here behind a bunch of stuff. Let me change my resolution quick. Thanks for letting me know there. It's 7. Oh my lord! I don't know how much thinking I'm going to be able to do at this resolution. I don't think my brain will go that small. We'll see how productive I can be. Is this easier to read? So oh yeah, I'm gonna have to I'll have to code like this. Oh, you have no idea what you're putting me through here, folks. Please ask questions, because at this point I'm now realizing that it's going to be a little hard for me to be productive with this small. So let me pull up my source tree. Not that one. Sorry. And so I did some basic work to bootstrap this, and the work was not that much. Effectively, what I did was I changed the generic type I changed the type of the data from object question mark to T, and I defined an internal type def to represent how to translate these things. And then I updated the function targets to take a T parameter in. And now the work gets hard. And so this is going to be insanely boring for most people. Increase my IntelliJ font size. Do you realize what you're asking me to do? You're right, I should. But it's also, let's see here. Size, paste the arrow. Okay, I'm going to go about that far. Oh Lord. So usually what I have done in the past, there's a few things here, and it gets really gnarly in a project like this. So I'll try to walk you through how I think about these things. So I have a package here that's the library, and I want to change code in here at some point. But I also wanted to change and work on the builder at the same time. And so I want to evolve the builder code as I'm evolving the framework code and build them together, because I'm going to expose features that need to be available at runtime. Like imagine you're just writing, what I can imagine is, forget there is a builder involved. Let's imagine I had an API that's defined this function framework. What does the library itself provide the hooks needed for an end user to actually write the code? That's kind of the first question. And the second question is, and then you want to think, okay, imagine I had a robot, me, effectively, right? Like if I was given a function definition of this, how would I code against it to wire it up to the function framework? I do those things. And then it's like, okay, now make the builder smart enough to fill in that and do that thing for you, right? That's all. So the function framework itself doesn't have a lot of tests. It basically has a test to make sure that, I can get rid of that. That's nice. The function framework has tests to basically make sure that the stuff that's built within the function framework is built. Because it actually uses builders itself. It doesn't use, the function framework library itself does not use the builder, the function framework builder. It does use JSON serializable though, because the cloud event serializes to JSON. So I use that. But that's the only real testing within the function framework. The real testing happens in this test package, in this test library here, called hello. I should rename that. And this is all the work to make sure, I can change the defaults just work. And I can send sig int and terminate server. And I can change the port, and the port gets mapped correctly. All the cloud event stuff. So the testing actually happens in this other package. And the reason that is because you want to actually define functions. Here's all the cloud functions that are defined, and there's a bunch of them here. And then you want to actually have this package do all the things. So it actually, the server is built using the builder. And it defines these case statements to return the right handler for a given target, and then wire them up. So that's what testing happens. So a common pattern that I will do here, now, is I will do, I have an alias for, oh gosh, where is it? There's too many. Where is it? Sorry for the small font here, but PBR, pub run build owner. And if those that know American beer will also get this running. So I'll actually do PBR watch for both delete conflicts in this directory. And I'll just let it run. So I probably changed some stuff, so it's rejiggering here. I was hoping people would ask questions about JSON serializable, because it's like, I'll just go answer questions and feel smart. But I'll do this until I get questions. And let me check Twitter really quick here. No, and no one's said anything on Twitter. So you'll see that I'm running my build on my test package, and it's done, and nothing happened, and that's a good thing. Function demo card. So now what I can do is, I'm a very big believer in Git diff-based development. But just really quickly, if I wanted to, I can come into here, and I could do, let me just make one up at the top. Well, I've already done, so I have this thing, cloud event. So I can come in here and do cloud function, cool. Void typed cloud event handler, cloud event. And I'll just do pub sub right now, just for fun. Event. Hit save. What you'll notice is the builder should spin up very fast. It does. And the server is deleted. Now, why is the server deleted? The server is deleted because there's an error in my builder. And that's because this function type, not compatible with a supported function type. So cloud event of pub sub doesn't work. I need a cloud event of T. In fact, if I come in here and just delete that, I'm guessing, and hit save, the build is super fast, and everything's fine. And there's my new case statement for this. So that would be a good thing for me to work on right now, is get the build to not fail. get the build to not fail when I when that type comes through. I've had a thought about completely refactoring things right now. If you see this error right here, I basically have a hardwired list of handler types that I support. And I walk through them and I check, is it compatible with this? Is it compatible with this? Is it compatible with this? I thought for a while that I would change this because I think this starts to get a little bit confusing. And instead what I want is, but I don't know if I want to do that now or not. I'm not sure. And the matrix here gets interesting because you'll see that I have 3 handler types that I support. Sorry, where'd we go? Almost just pasted that. I have 3 handler types I support, and each of them have 2 versions. They have there's a handler and a handler with logger. So actually handle. So if you're doing HTTP, you get access to your logger. And then you have these typed ones. And response type here is actually a generic. So it could be any JSONable object. And there's JSON handler, basically with logger, or with context, and a JSON handler without context. And same thing with cloud event. And that's where things get a little bit bananas. So let's go look at the builder code. Let's close that. We're not going to use any of those. And this, you're please ask questions, and you can ask questions about things that aren't this, JSON serializable or null safety or whatever. Because what I've realized doing this is crazy code, and you will even someone who knows Dart really well will probably think we'll get a headache just because I wrote some crazy code here. So I will talk through a little bit what I'm working on, but no promises. So how does the builder work? I want to create a function type validator, which basically says, let me see what this is called. I can't convince it to treat the field as nullable and from JSON anywhere. Oh, Simon has a question. Thank you, Simon. I do have a JSON serializable question. Let's say I have a non-nullable field with a default value in the constructor. Is that supported JSON serializable 4? I can't convince the, oh. Simon, you just want to come on? I can just, just send you the streaming thing. I can answer this question for you, but it might be fun just to talk. It's the same Simon. I'm guessing it's the same Simon. Simon has a question. So Simon has a very good question here. And let me do this. About JSON serializable. Total tangent, folks. This is actually a feature I need to add, and that's all I've realized. And I think I actually commented on an issue yesterday about this. So this is all back to JSON serializable. Right now, you have to explicitly define the default you want if you want a default value in the annotation. And I've realized that's bad. And I think I should be able to sniff out at least some kinds of defaults from the argument itself at build time. And so I'm going to try to do that. And if that works, I will make it work. And if not, but I'm pretty sure I'll make it work. So I can do that later. Maybe if maybe I'll hack on this for 20 minutes and I'll just go implement that. Because I know more people are probably using JSON serializable than function framework. Let me know if you have a vote either way. Back to coding. So yeah, the function framework, I have this function type of validator. And what it does is let me see what this is called. That's called in my builder. I get a validator. And then the validator is actually, I realize now, a bad name. Because what it does more than validate. It actually goes in and say, oh, let me create a validator, and I need to get the resolver, because the resolver actually gives me access to all the code that's generated. It actually gives me access to the analysis context for all the code. So I need that in my validator. So every build that runs, I go and build this thing. And that's fine, because there's usually this is only invoked once for the whole package. And what the validator will do is it'll figure out if any of the libraries are annotated with this cloud function thing, and then it calls validate. And validate will go through, I think, and it'll either give me the invoke expression, basically the thing I need to generate into server.dart, or it'll throw a nice exception. That is what validate does. And let me go check on it to make sure it actually does that. Yeah. So it says, like, of all the types I have, do I have a reference that matches this? If it does, it returns that reference. This create reference thing, I think this is mine. Is this mine? Yeah. Or throws an invalid generation error saying, sorry, I can't party on this function definition. And in fact, if you go back to the error message I got here, I'm guessing that we hit line 38, invalid social generation error. So what I need to do is I need this call to succeed somewhere. And then going back to, where is it? It's up here probably. No. It's like, oh, this code. At some point here, I create a cloud event handler or a cloud event handler with context. These things need to do the right thing. And again, this is where things get interesting. I am now turning this, and this is, I think, very common stuff to do, right? It's like I realized I wanted to handle some very concrete types in a very concrete way. So what I did was I created a very generic structure where I could say, I'm going to handle a handler type from this library by using this output type. So if you look at the signature to a function, oh, my daughter's knocking. I'm on a video right now, love. What do you need? Okay. There's 9 people watching. This is crazy. If you need so I wrote this very generic thing. It uses strings, which drives me nuts. That's okay. What I say is, if the function you provide me is compatible with this, for instance, let me open handler with logger. Of course, that doesn't match anything right now because our search functionality does not support, excuse me, it doesn't support type defs when I say open class, but here it is. Where'd it go? Here it is. So if the function provided matches handler with logger right here, so it basically is a function that returns a response or a future of response or future or response, and I use the analyzer to match that, generate a matcher with this type. That's all it does. And it works great. And so I had 4 things that work that way. I had just general HTTP server stuff. So the easiest one is just shelf. I'm like, okay, if you just give me a normal shelf handler, this thing has a logger with it. But if you just give me a normal handler, use that. And I lived in this beautiful world where up until this change I just made, Cloud Event worked great with this model because it wasn't generic. And then when I wanted to go and support arbitrary objects, this is where I made this generic function type thing. And what generic function type thing is, it's more complicated. What this lets me do, and let me go look at the server output. This handles these types. This creates a handler that will take in your definition. So pub/sub handler, I have a pub/sub handler right now, which takes pub/sub. Pub/sub is not a library or a package or a class that's understood by the builder at all. It's generic. It is a thing that has a to_JSON and a from_JSON. The builder will recognize this type, and it generates all of this fun stuff. And so it actually has a special lambda. So if you look at the handler here, what it takes is it takes your function definition. It takes an arbitrary type. So request type. This is again, if folks from Wednesday's talk, I actually don't use the single letter T for my generic type. I use a full word. So there's response type and request type and response type, just for my own sanity. So these are actually generic type arguments. So you give me your function that's generic with those things, and you give me a factory that lets me take an arbitrary object, in this case JSON, and returns the request type. So if you go back to my server, that's what the server does. So I take in your handler, and I take in this thing, And JSON is meant to be, it can be any valid JSON. So it could be null, it could be a list, it could be a string, integer, whatever. And I try to convert it for you. So I call your constructor. So you see I'm actually binding to the library that's imported. This is all the generated code. And I convert. And what's nice about this, and why you had to do it this way, is I want to catch the case where the conversion, the generating of your type, is bad. I want that code to happen in a catch that I own as the framework, because then I can send a bad request exception. This is not an error on the part of the framework. This is not even an error part of your code necessarily. This is an error part of the caller who did not provide valid stuff. And in that case, I want to throw a bad request exception. So that is why I have this logic. And of course, what's very interesting, and these are the things you think about, is already right now I can see how this could be easier, because I could set this up so really what you provide is just a function that does the conversion from the type you have to this, because this is all boilerplate, and I probably could just generate this too. So that would be another refactoring to do later. And this is one of those interesting things about code builders, which is like, this is the obvious code to write. The problem is if you scroll down, you see that I actually generated it a couple times, and I don't need to. Like, I probably could set this up so that it's less boilerplate, even generated boilerplate, and it's actually built into the library. So, things to think about later. But so what you've seen though is I have the cloud event types here and cloud event with context, and right now they're just these functions. Just take your function, because every cloud event looks the same. And now it is to turn that from being just the same into generic, which means I need to parse the generic type on the class and do the right thing. And that is a lot more work. And so that's what I'm signing up for right now. So I might tiptoe into that here for maybe 10 minutes. Actually, you know what? I'm going to think about it. I'll let people chime in. My thought now is this is going to get really ugly really fast and just be a lot of refactoring and debugging. And I might just go fix Simon's bug instead, because I like Simon. And also, I think it might be slightly more straightforward to explain what I'm doing. So chime in here in 30 seconds. And if I don't hear a lot of people saying, no, do this thing in cloud function, I think I'm just going to go fix Simon's bug. No one's saying anything. But last night, and Jesus. So anyway, I think even though I might switch my gears pretty quickly here, I think it might be, at least you guys got an interesting idea for how function framework is architected, and a little bit of how the builder works and how I test it. It's a little bit crazy. Builders end up being a little crazy, but they're fun to do. But you want to build them in a way, you want to build builders in a way that handles things well, that handles things correctly, and are robust. And ideally, they handle narrow cases well, and then the things that they don't handle at all, things that they don't handle, they blow up with good error messages. And getting that all to be right takes a lot of work. So what I'm looking for now is over here. I swear I replied to someone yesterday on an issue about changing the default here, because I want to make sure I reference a bug when I start an issue. It might be a closed issue now that I think about it. And no one in the chat is telling me they want me to do anything differently. This is yes. So it's issue 796. And basically the idea is, let me just get the default value from the data type. So I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. What I do think I will be able to do in some minimal cases, so basically for things that are valid literals, so strings, integers, is I think I should be able to extract out the default value from the argument, from the parameter. And so we'll try that out. So thank you, Function Framer. It was fun. We'll go JSON serializer. This is, I think you guys can see my thought process. So, we have master and main now. So I wrote this little utility that says go to MA, whatever MA is, master or main, and just checks out main and makes sure I'm updated. That's all that does. So we just decided we had an issue, right? And no one is commenting, so I'm guessing I'm just going to keep going. There's still 8 people watching this. You guys are all doing other work and just listening to me in the back of your head, right? Oops. So what issue is this? This is issue 796. Let me get check out -BI 796 defaults from CTR params. All right. So who is this? From Australia. He's probably not watching this right now. But Ryan Nell from Australia, this is for you. We'll see if we can get her working. So how do you start making a change to JSON serializable? Well, it's a little nuts. Create a branch. That's a good thing to do. And then generally what I will do is, so here's JSON serializable. It's kind of big. It's structured as a monorepo again. So we have check YAML. I've mentioned that before. That's this crazy thing that lets you get good, clean errors out of parsing YAML. So I've included that here because often I'm working on all these together. There's an example package that just shows how to use it. And oftentimes people will file issues saying, you don't support this. I'm like, I do. You just have to do it this way. And I will put it in the example thing. So it lives on forever. This is how you solve this problem. And then you have the runtime thing. That's also the annotation and the builder. So JSON serializable is the builder. And JSON annotation is the class annotation. And of course, if I would do it all again, I would do this differently because JSON serializable, the class, lives in the JSON annotation package, just to give everyone a headache. So I'm sorry for that. Not back to 9 people. Say hi. Say hi. I feel like I'm talking to a void right now. So say hi in the chat quick that you're still paying attention. Will make me feel less self-conscious. So I will do exactly what I did last time, which is I'm in the root of the monorepo here. I'm going to JSON serializable here, and I'll do PBR watch for both, and I'll just start my builder. There is a lot of code that gets built in JSON serializable, especially for the tests. And so pre-compiling basically, so just some context here in the build system, it actually pre-compiles the builder executables into binaries that run. And if things change at the SDK, they'll recompile those. And then the guys, Jake and Nate, are just machines and rock stars, and we're lucky to have them working in the build system. So they set this up so that if I change a file, that's an output file, generated file, it will just rebuild, and it rebuilds almost instantly. Like, it is a little bananas how fast it goes. And if I rebuild, so let me close out this source gen from this repository and remove this guy. So you see right now, it is cranking. And now it's going to go generate everything. So here's everything. And hopefully everything should be fine here. Yep. And everything's fine here. And now I'm going to go write an example. I'm going to add in probably a test, I guess. And this is going to be default values. So probably this is a better place to put it. So you see what I have here is I have a bunch of just test classes. And then I do some other crazy work. Well, I actually generate this file, but then I also have a builder that goes and generates this file. So this is using this AnyMap thing. So the first thing, I have a test builder, and all that does is it turns this file into this file. And the difference between these two files is that this has AnyMap true and checked true in the arguments. And then after this file is built right here, then these two files are built by JSON serializable. But now I have the exact same input file, and I'm getting 2 sets of tests out of it because it's validating both the checked any map case and the default case, which is a little bananas, but that's how I do it. And then I have some interfaces that I can share between them so that I can write the same. Then I have one set of tests that can work over both, which is great. So this is how I make sure. And this is why when people ask me, oh, add function feature X to JSON serializable, I understand, and it's cool. The problem is it's a matrix now, right? It's like you add one feature, okay, cool. How does that play with any map? How does that play with checked? How does that play with what other random feature? And explicit to JSON, whatever. And there's a lot of cases there, and that can get really complex. Right now, it's like, oh, support this kind of type. Well, now I have to add a matrix for that kind of type, and then that type nullable, and that might be slightly different, plus any map, plus checked. And so it ends up being this like n-dimensional matrix. And so I'm really pushing back hard on adding new features to JSON serializable. This one is good because this actually removes features in a way. This maybe you can get to a point where instead of having an explicit default value, we just pick it up from the Dart code you write. That's what nullable is great. I used to have this is nullable or support nullable, allow null. It's actually deprecated now because the language now represents nullability, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I realize I should turn my video on when I'm talking to you. I should have the video on so you can see this. Let me know if you can still see the code okay here. So deep breath. I don't actually know if this is the best place to put it. It kind of seems like it is. And now the question is, so if I was going to be really diligent here, what I would do, which would be bananas, is I would go through and I would update my generator so that I have a generator that has a constructor type, and I'd actually generate 3 values from the same input, so I don't have to do it 3 times. I probably will do that later. What I will do now, though, is I will do a new file, and I will do implicit default value.dart. And what I'm going to hope, so this is good because this has a constructor. And now the door is ringing, and my wife is out on a walk with my daughter. So I think I have to go to the door. So I'm going to leave the chat for a while. There should be a button here I can push to say like be right back and like play music. But instead of that, I will just do like I'll be right back. I'll just do that. Hello? Hi. Please. I'm back. Still 8 people. Wow, 8 people have nothing else to do. So what I would love to do is have this all be the same test case, effectively, with 3 different implementations. But already looking, I can see it's not going to work because I have my fields that are just read-writable, and the constructor is all normal values. Like these aren't optional named values. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically copy the structure of this because it covers a bunch of cases, which I like. Let me see what the interface is. Yeah, because the interface assumes it has. I guess it's abstract. I'll at least follow the shape of it. But to really just start with, I'm going to create a class here. I call it default value implicit. And I'll put in, these are where you can good artist copy, great artist steal. Or just influence this guy. Well, at least go grab the ones I know. All those I should be able to figure out. But I want to start simple. So let's just start with these folks. Do that and do default value. That's it. required this dot field bool, required this dot field string, required this dot. And actually, might not like use required, but we'll see this in required this dot field double. Now what I've realized is if I go in and give these all good defaults, true, sure. String value, sure. Of course, 42, and of course, 3.14. That's how we roll. And then, required. Now this is the fun bit, so let me go like this and go like this. Nothing's happened here, but as soon as I come here and add JSON serializable, hit save, the build starts, and look how fast that was. And immediately I get this. I need a part here. So I come in here and I add my part and I hit enter and hit go. Boom! And IntelliJ is slow, but it's here. Already, it's there. It's that fast. All right. And this is like, now I'm just kind of put that aside, and that's good. So let's close a bunch of this stuff so I can keep track of my sanity. And let's open up the generated file. And already we see how the generated file is wrong, because we know that this is likely null. If it's empty, it's null, and it'll blow up. This will just blow up spectacularly. And in fact, I don't know how much in this. So I have a bunch of test stuff here. I'm going to create a new test right now, real quick. And I'll do default value implicit default value test. Cool. And I will import package test. I'll import default value implicit, or implicit default value. There you go. Test-driven development, folks. And give it a not very good name, but that's okay. And what do we want in the end? I want to be able to do final instance equals implicit, default implicit. I probably should name that. Oops. I'm quite ready for that. We'll figure that out in a second here. Even better, let me go wireless up real quick, and let's see where I'm going. The analyzer actually should yell at me. So I have some fields. There you go. Dynamic. Robert, I'm glad you're happy. This goes to from Jason, cool. Map. Consistency is good. If someone wants to jump on the stream with me, seriously, I'm lonely. Just let me know, and I'll send you the link. I like talk to me while I code. Jason. Jason, this. That's it. That's how you wire it up, folks. Good. And so now I can come in here and do from JSON. Like, how do I, this is if someone was to file issues on JSON serializable, this is what I want you to do. This would make me so happy, which is I want to write my class. So this is exactly what I'm doing, right? I want to define a class like this. That's what you're saying. And notice this class doesn't depend on anything, doesn't depend on 15 customized libraries. It's just a minimal reproduction, right? Which just depends on my code. And I want to write that class, and then I want to do this, and then I want to do final output equals instance dot to JSON. Even better, I'm going to do expect. And what do I want this to? I want this to have the default value. So this is the other thing I do. I'm sure there's a better way to do this in IntelliJ. I just haven't learned yet. I'm going to go to this. I'm going to see this. And what I want this to have is, in this, I want this to have field bool is true. I want this to have field string is string value. And eventually I will just go steal all of this from this guy, and I'll just use this. In fact, I will just use this right now. What's funny is, oh, I guess string. I use the exact same values. I didn't even look at it. I want this test to pass. So we're going to code until this test passes. That is like kind of my goal now. And let me look at my my other. Just 1 second. I'll look at Twitter here quick. Okay, it just does, folks. So, are we take any bets about if this is going to pass or not? I'm going to guess no. Implicit value text. And this will fail. But I like to see it's. I'm weird. I want to see the failure. This like grounds me in reality. So I have my builder just sitting here, not doing anything. That's what I expected. So where is that error coming from? And in fact, let me be a good developer because I actually like IntelliJ has pretty good integration here. Yes. This failed, and I expected it to fail. Okay, right here, because this thing is null. It shouldn't be null. So watch now watch. This is how I keep myself honest. Oops. I'm actually, let me just commit this as like test whip, work in progress. What I want this to do. So let's go look at this code again. I set up keyboard shortcuts to switch tabs, and I like that a lot. So what I want, let's just do the bool right now. Let's just do that. That's kind of what we want, right? True. So what I want this to do is I want this to do as bool, otherwise true. Right? That's exactly what I want. That's the code I want this to generate. Is that should be string dynamic or string. Int question mark. And if that's null, that's double question. 42. Oops. The literal integer. This is even fun, more fun. I want this to cast as a num question mark, which means I have to call this. Let's see if I get this right. Yes. There we go. So this is fun, and let me know if this makes sense. This is saying cast this. So this, what's great is this will fail. Like if someone puts a string in here, this will fail. The interesting thing is on the web, you can't control. The reason I do that here is you can't control if like a double might come off as an integer, right? I might want to double type and type it as double, but 42 is an integer. We treat it like an integer. So you'll see in JSON serializable, because I want to support the web and make this work, compile the web, is I will do toNum as num, and then convert it to the explicit Dart type, and that makes everything work. So I do the as num, I call this null safe. So that means if this is not null, give me double. Otherwise, conditionally call it or return null, and then cast. So I want that code to work. And in fact, if I go run my test right now, the test passed. Yay! So now this is my next step, my next iteration, is I take that and I drag that up here, down to 4 people. Clearly this is not interesting enough. I take that code, I generate that up here. Now I have a stake in the ground. Because guess what? If I come back to this guy and I just add a new line, oops, and I make the builder run, I go back. That doesn't do anything, right? Let's reset that. But look, by editing the file, I've kicked my builder. So I'll say goals. Now I have my job, right? And my job is I have the code I want the generator to give me. It's right here. But this is what the generator is currently doing, and that makes me sad. And I want to fix that. And so now I will go back and write a bunch more tests. and I will write tests that validate error cases and a bunch of other stuff. Like, this is not enough to be done. But what this does now is I have a goal because I know my tests pass. So now it's kind of funny, right? It's like, what's the thing with the statue? It's like, how do you carve the David? You start with a block of marble and you carve away everything that doesn't look like the David until you have the David. That's this, right? So I'm just going to carve until my generator spits this out. And then I'm done. That's it. But see how I did this? I started with the test first. Start with the test first. And I see people send me pull requests for JSON serializable all the time that try to fix a thing, and there's no test. And it did weird things to the output. And I was like, what are you trying to solve? What is your goal? Like, write a new test that solves your problem. So that's what I did here. And now I'll work backwards. So you guys saw how fast these builds went through, right? 82 milliseconds, 45 milliseconds, 48 milliseconds, really fast. Guess what? If you change the builder code itself, it takes a lot more time. And so this starts going slowly. And in fact, I'm tempted to go do another thing. I have tests now that validate output, and that actually runs a little faster. So depending how slow this is, I might have to go deal with that. We'll see. So deep breath. In fact, I can close this folder now. I don't even need to look at tests anymore because what I have is I have my output here and I have my git diff. This is now my truth. And I can just code until that looks good. And what I'll do is I'll probably do debug output here to keep me sane. Yeah, that's it. And this is where it gets gnarly, my friends. So, oh, how do I do this? So I probably want to handle this already. I probably have logic somewhere that handles default values. And in fact, what I'm tempted to do here, and I think it'll work, what I'm tempted to do is, so I have existing logic now that generates a JSON key. In fact, I did some other, well, yeah, I think this is all interesting, actually, so humor me. So you annotate your classes in JSON serializable with JSON key. Let me go look at JSON key. And it has all this stuff. And these are all nullable, all nullable. And that's for a very good reason, because I need to know if you didn't set something. If you didn't set something, I need to go look at your configuration for the class at JSON serializable, especially for things like if include if null. A few of these are disallow null value. A few of these are inherited from the class annotation. And then the class annotation itself is, if nothing's set there, you get data from the configuration your class has. So it works its way down. And what I did null safety was I realized was when I'm running the code in the builder, I want the answers. So I don't want any of these to be null. I have an answer for if ignore exists or not. I don't want this to be a bool question mark. I don't want this to be nullable. I have consolidated the configuration of the whole package and the configuration of JSON serializable annotation on the class and the configuration in your field. I've consolidated. I have an answer. So what I did was I stopped using JSON key in the generator code itself. I created a new thing that looks pretty much exactly like JSON key, but with only the things non-nullable that don't need to be nullable. And that got rid of a lot of exclamation points all over the place. I got rid of a lot of bangs. And I did the exact same thing for JSON serializable, the class. If you actually look at this guy, I have a subclass. It's called config, class config. And guess what? I can take a field that's nullable, and in a subclass, change its type to non-nullable. And that's totally fine, because the subclass, a bool is a completely valid nullable bool, right? Just instead of having 3 values, it has 2. So what I'm thinking, this is another thing I try to think about, is how do I minimize the churn I create for myself? So I have this this key config thing, and let me go back to the usage of it. I have a class here, populate JSON config or key config. And so default value, you see I just populate default value. So default value is flowing in here from this class. I clearly populate this a couple places. What should I get? 28, what's that one? So if there is no annotation on the class, basically just populate it with, so you see I pass in the class annotation and the element. And so that figures things out. And this figures out, oh, like if the class annotation, so this is like the annotated JSON annotation on the class, pull the value out of that, you know. So it uses the class annotation to figure out, oh, do I rename the fields using snake casing or Pascal casing or kebab casing? It grabs that from the class, all those things. And so this is the, so this is now the fun. And so now, okay, so we have that, and we have the field element. This is great. And but we don't have here, well, I guess we do in a manner of speaking. We have the field element that defines the property that corresponds to potentially this constructor argument, right? What we don't have is the constructor. And so what I want this function to have now, the people that are still paying attention, I'm doing a shout out to the live stream now, again, purely for my own, you know, my own ego. Like, are you guys listening? Is this interesting? I'm going to keep cranking, but just a little bit of a ping, because I've been out in the weeds for a while, for the 5 that are currently watching. And I'll obviously keep this video up, and we'll see if people like it later. So this thing generates the configuration that I use throughout the builder around how is this field configured. What I need to pass in now is I'll also pass in constructor information. And hopefully that constructor information includes the parameter that may have a default value. So I will flow that information into this function. And what I will do there is this, is I will basically say the default value I configure is either the default value provided by the user. And if there is none, I will flow into this the value that's in the constructor parameter, that default. And so let me go back to this guy, and I'll show you exactly. This is what I want to crack out. I want to go see if I can hunt down this value, and I'm going to smuggle it in to this function. In fact, maybe I'll smuggle it in. Maybe I don't have to change the way this function is implemented. Maybe I'll just change the way this I call this function, and I'll pass that value in. Go find the default value if it exists, and pass it in. And if the user isn't explicit about the default value to use in their annotation, I'll grab it here. And we'll be good to go. And no one is talking to me on the chat, so I don't know if everyone's asleep. That's fine. We'll see how this works later. Oops. And these are always the things you find too, which is, guess what? It's allow null value. There's a little bug in my. So I will go into my code right now, and I'll go into here and go. So notice what I'm doing. I'm creating a one-off commit message here. One-off commit with this one-off change. I'm not doing it all together. I'm going to commit it here. But look, this is my build restarting because I changed code. That's fine. And so now I have this nice little commit. So I could take this, I could rebase this down to master and end it by itself. There's a whole bunch of stuff I could do, right? But I want to fix this bug, and I'm not going to come back to it, right? I'm going to fix it now, which is a spelling mistake. But now I have this nice little commit that I can go grab later. So these are clearly not ship-worthy commit messages. Goals, test. I'm going to rebase, I'm going to rework it later. This actually is something I might ship. There might need to be a test associated with this. I might actually validate that this text is used, but I don't want to lose track of that. That's a good bug to fix. Let's fix it now. Just put it in its own commit. You can deal with it later. Okay. So what we can do now is we call in default value, and we call in with a question mark. What I could actually populate JSON key. I think the two places. So this is a big crazy function that returns this stuff. Big crazy function. So watch, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to call this object question mark. I'm going to call this find default value. I'm going to say I'm probably just going to do. Yep, I'm going to do object question mark here. I'm going to annotate the value. This will all make sense, I think, soon. I'm going to do that right now. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make this required. And now my analyzer is going to get mad at me. It's like, you're not giving me default value. And you're right. So I'm going to go here and go default value. And this is find default value. I'm going to pass in null. Because in this case, there's no key, there's no default value. And then the other place I call this function, I'm sorry, I have a bunch of code here, population key. So the two places I call this down here, default value. And here I'm going to call in and go find default value. I'm going to pass it in here. Oops, let me make sure I do it right. Try to do it right. Find default value. Now this, ooh, love the format. Okay, good. I'm glad you like it. I did nothing here, right? Nothing happened. I just did a no-op. This function does nothing. But this is very important, and actually I think this is a very useful way to kind of do it incrementally. So notice how I whittled down the world. I've come from having no idea how to implement this thing. It's like, oh, I already have a concept of default value. That's great. I'm going to overload that. I see where the value is populated. I know that as long as I flow through the right value here, I'm good. Let me make sure I flow through the right value here. Let me make sure that every case where I'm calling populate JSON key, I'm required to provide the default value. I do that here. And then I change the implementation. So that every time I call populate JSON key, I give the default value and I call this function. Now we can start having fun. Because now I can figure out, well, what do I need in this function to figure that out? I'm not sure right now. I need to figure that out. But what I can do is I can add arguments to this function. And now I know every place that calls this, I better provide those arguments. And so I will have to do my work to figure that out. And now I just crank. Now I just dig through and I'm going to do printf debugging and rerun the build and see what my output is. I'm just going to turn the crank to figure out what I need to do. And if I was, I might even kill my build and run it in IntelliJ with debugger, and that's fine. And that will keep me honest. And so I'll figure out what I need to do. And for those that are just joining right now, you might just scroll back on YouTube and you can watch from earlier to understand what we're doing. Because now what I'm pretty sure I need is I need the constructor. And so this gets more gnarly. Because now I come here and like, oh, I don't have any access to the constructor. I have no access to the constructor from this point. And in fact, it looks like this function is only called once. And what I get is the class config and the field element. So another question is, OK, where I pass the class config in here, and in fact, what I can do, and actually just let me do that right now, is I'm going to change this and say, oh, give me the class config. Class config. I still can't do anything, but now I know these two places I call this. I pass in the class config. There. Cool. Now the question, now I've just backed up my question a little bit further. I know when I create this instance, this class config instance, I know that I'm looking at the class that is being run. I know that I'm looking at the shape of the class. I look at the annotation. I look at the constructor. So now I need to figure out how do I crack open and include the information here that I'll need later. So what I can do now is I can go look at class config, and I see, oh, there's a constructor for class config. And I can see I created a few places. It's probably not where, that's probably not it. That's probably not it. Where do I create a class config? Oh, and this looks like it. So I have this settings thing. And this settings thing, this is actually where I normalize things and say, oh, if the provided class, JSON serializable, if it's null, just pull in the default. Pop in the default. That's what I'm doing there. But that doesn't look quite like what I need. So let's see, where do I create? And I'm merge a reader. Constant reader. I wonder if this reader, and this is just me digging. I don't quite remember how I implemented this, so I'm just going to dig. I'll look at merge config. What do I call this guy? And so this is the annotation on the class. Oh, and I actually pass in the class element. That's good to know, because I need that later. In fact, let me go see. It looks like class element's required, and it is required. Good. So now I can see that, okay, this is a place where I create a class config. Class element, type parameters. So now I'm seeing this is where I can get a configuration, and this is maybe where I can get these values. So what do I want here? I think now I'm just brainstorming what I can add to class config, because this is a JSON serializable, but I can add more stuff to it. What I think I need here is I want class config to have, everything else is override. These are all values I'm just providing values for JSON serializable. What I want to add now is I want to add a final map of string to object. I could do question mark and provide all the values. Or I could just say, you know what, if it's null, just forget it. Just forget it. I don't need it if it's null. I'll just include non-nullable default. So I can do CPR param defaults. There you go. And I'll say that this is required. This constructor parameter defaults. So already we're kind of shaking it down. So now I'm saying is I don't know how I'm going to get this yet. I still need to figure that out. But I know that the code at the end of the day that needs this it's going to get it. In fact, what I could do is, just as an example, that works fine, right? I can go all the way back here to this thing. I can go all the way back to this thing. And now I can do is I probably will change this. I'll make this object question mark. And this is where this is actually where named arguments is actually pretty good, right? Because this actually will keep me honest. Like, let me actually do this. Param default. And what do I want this to do? When do I want this? I want this to be like this. If the annotated value is null, the param default. That also might be null, and that's fine. That means we can't do it. But now I can go in here and go, okay. So the default value is either the annotated value, or it is the param default. And this class annotation thing is not going to cut it. What I need to do is that, and then I need to figure out the field name. Yep, and they want it to be the defined field name, not like the annotation. So this will be element.name. Amazing to watch. I'm glad you think one positional argument expected, 2 found. I think maybe go. Get that one. You find that this is amazing to watch. You make me happy. Right fancy. So annotated value is this. Yep. And then the param default is this guy. Field.name. Oops. What do I call it up here? Let me find what's up here. And in fact, I already have a little bit of a twitch, right? What I want is I want to do this once. But now I want it both places. So I'm going to do final constructor param default. Yes. This is my argument with everyone. I am a big fan of the commas, and I want to have, if you're, and this is totally a style thing, but I think it's kind of nice. Param default is this. What was the field I just created? Constructor thing. Okay, that is what we need. And so if I go back to my builder's actually crashed because at some point the code is invalid. So let's start the builder up again. This shouldn't crash, right? All I should see though, but this is probably okay code to keep. This is probably okay code to keep. This is still bad. This is the code that this is what I wrote before. This is what I wanted. This is what I wanted to look like. This is what the builder's doing now. So let's see if the builder actually chunks through. Again, this takes a lot longer because it's it worked great. So now we can even cheat a little bit, and this is a bit crazy to do, but actually it's kind of fun. Like this is one of those sanity checks you can do. So I went in here and did this, right? What I could do is just to see if, so now the question is, can I populate this map correctly? If I can populate that map correctly, my assumption is everything will work. I'll get exactly what I want. Because already I have the logic in there to do this logic here that's like, oh, instead of doing bool, do bool question mark value. I already have that logic in. That's handled by default. I just want to wire it through. And so now I can even run a little test, which is, let me just populate this const with my default. I'm not shipping this code. I'm just validating the logic, right? So my builder is going to rerun here because I changed my default. And the generate code should actually work. And it might go to other places, right? Because I'm not populating this correctly. But this actually should work. And so this is like my test to see if I can get to the point where I can populate this field, does everything work? So now the build's going to run. And it might do a bunch of stuff, right? Who knows? Maybe, I guess, field bool, the chance it's a different type somewhere is wrong. But now let's go look at our diff. Look, it worked. And in fact, I guess, yeah, nowhere else. And so this is insane that I do this, right? You shouldn't do this, but this is my sanity check. It's like, okay, now I see that the type that went, like, if I can populate this thing correctly, everything else will flow through, in theory. I know that it'll work. So now I'm just, can I populate class config correctly? I'm like, started from the base, and I'm working my way up. So let me get rid of all this. Let me go required. So that is now, that code I think is okay. The build's going to rerun here. It's going to fail because of these errors. And now I go fix these errors. And this is what you do. And I just kind of work my way up. So the defaults for this, so I can already kind of do this one, right? This one I know is just I can't do anything. This, by default, there are no values. That's fine. And I have this merge config thing and this thing. So the merge config takes what you get from JSON serializable and merges it with this. And so the question is, do I really only have to do the work here? And I think this is the only place I have to do the work. Yes, we generate a config, fine. And from here. Annotation. Oh, if there's an annotation on the class. If there's an annotation on, so you gotta remember where this stuff comes from. So this code is like, figure out if there's an annotation on the class where it's serializable. If there is, return it. But oh, by the way, please also collapse the defaults. And I'm guessing where the other config comes from. The question is where the other config comes from. From the context. Oh. Yeah, this is, so I'm not going to be any help here, folks. I'm just thinking through this carefully. So this is in the deserialize a type. in JSON helper. So this is going through and actually getting. So what this is doing is this is sniffing out if I'm recursively generating code. This is like for a type for another type that might exist. It's doing the right thing, and it's tough to explain. But this is not where I want to change things because I'm already getting the class config from the context. Where else? Oops, where else is that called? Slava. What's up? I'm live coding. That's what I'm doing. And JSON helper. So both of those cases, the annotate thing is not so merge. Okay, so I have to do the right thing in merge in both cases. So merge is called there, and it's getting the key config from somewhere else. So I think I have to do it here. Well, no, I can't do it here because when I'm calculating the settings of a class, I don't have access to the actual. Yeah, this is the insanity. I'm pretty sure that when config is set, this is. Yeah, I don't have access to the type yet. This is basically settings is. Settings, yeah. Settings is default. Settings is basically what's the distilled configuration I get when I've already consumed the build.yaml file. If that makes any sense. So that means I don't know what the class is here. All I'm getting is, so this is where it means I have to do this is this. I don't know. Which means merge is now where I have to do the work. And that is great. Because a couple things. One is I should be able to assert here config dot this. That I'm merging in a thing, but I'm cracking open the annotation from the reader. So I don't have that here. So this should be empty. But now is the fun part. Now is the work. Now I need to go crack that class element, go find its default constructor, go look at its parameters, and see if I have values. That's the work. And so I'm going to cheat right now, and I think this is common. This is what you do. I will just do nothing here right now. I'm just going to have the code work and get my builder rebuilding. And again, if you're just joining now, you might want to rewind because we're deep in the weeds. But it's fun. You'll see kind of how I'm doing stuff. Slava, you want to come on and say hi? I can send you a private link to join if you want to chat. And we can do a little side commentary if you want. Just let me know. I can tweet you. I can tweet you a thing. Actually, wait. I'll just tweet it to you anyway, and then you can decide. I'm guessing he's on Twitter. I'm guessing Sal's on Twitter. So I'll just do it. There you go. Here, if you're bored. You have kids, though. I guess it's late. Is it late in Denmark? If you want to join, come on and join. Say hi. So code builds. We think that one's fine. We think this one's fine. We know that's bad. This is where we're coding. And we have crazy output. So I'm actually going to go and kill this a second. And I'm going to get rid of verbose. I'm hoping we're not going to have errors. That's really what you want verbose for, errors. And what's nice is then I can just see my prints. And that's all I really want now is my prints. For NF debugging, guys, it's the way of the future, I tell you. Now, what's annoying is I already likely have code that goes to find the default constructor. So I'll clean this up later. But just because people are watching, that's on the constructors. But yeah, this is seriously what I end up doing. It's like, I don't remember what default constructors are named. So let's just do this and see what happens. Yeah, seriously, if someone watching right now is on Twitter and you want to come just join in the stream and say hi and ask questions, like that'd be fun. I can do that. I probably have to stop here in about 20 minutes. I didn't get very far because this is complicated. Ah, here we go. So now I'm just debugging out every default constructor, and there's a lot of them. So really what I want is, but now I know what I want, which is, this is where I import package collection, if I haven't already. Because what I want to do here, actually use these little nice little club things on the side to see where I am. Here we go. Default CQR equals class elements dot constructors dot single where or null element dot name is empty. The funny thing is, I know that better to be a default constructor, and JSON serializable is not going to work at all. But I'm just going to be defensive here because I don't want to think about it. Great. I can go default constructor dot parameters. Aha. This is seriously how it works. So let me hydrate what I think I need, right? So what do I need? I need a param default value map. This is a string of objects, right? Because I'm not doing nullable things. And now I do for var param and default constructor dot parameters. And look, I have all this stuff. Default value code has default value. So let's do parameters dot where. Let's just do that. Element dot has default value. And now I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to want. So I'm just going to print the param. It's not very sexy, but that's what we do. Param dot default value code. I don't even know what that is, but I guess we'll just do that. We'll print that and let's see what it looks like. We know, and sure, let's put this in here. We know it's empty right now, but we're trying to populate it. So let's do param default value map. There. Let's save it. With no safety changes, what's the recommended way to? Okay, so I'm looking at questions now from Dan. Hey, Dan. With no safety changes, what's the recommended way to deal with JS interop libraries using package.js? Is it best to just assume that anything returned from JS should be treated as nullable? Good question, Dan. Sorry for a little tangent. Dan, you know what it is? I don't know. I think honestly, in JavaScript, right? Like you can call certain functions and sometimes you'll get null and sometimes you won't. You could always be defensive and just, in theory, nothing's typed, right? So you could in theory say, oh, I need to type everything's object question mark and check everything. But if you know reliably that it's not, I don't think there's any problem with not assuming things are null. Like if you know something's, look at Dart HTML. We are effectively doing interop there through different means. And there are arguments and parameters and things and values that are not nullable because we know that in general, when you call those APIs, you don't get a null value. Yeah, that's all. We have a great thing, my folks, my friends. Look, because we have. This is Rathmar. Look, we're seeing it. It's there. We are seeing the field and this. Now here's the unfortunate bit, right? What do we get from our analyzer friends? We don't get the value we want. We don't get the value we want. We get a string, which is unfortunate. Return the Dart code of the default value or null if none is defined. Oh my Lord. Oh Lord, help us. But it's better than nothing. And so now this is so now think of where we started, right? We're like, oh, I'm going to implement this feature, is crazy. Now we're down to an encoding problem. I don't know if we get anything better from the analyzer or not. That looks like it's best we get is a string. But now we're in the realm of tractable. And so maybe we say is, oh, well, how to think about how should I put this? Maybe we can't support every default value in the world, or maybe we have to do some crazy parsing here. Maybe we need to file an issue, a request to the analyzer team to give us better. But we know, like, for straightforward things, we probably can make some good success, right? And so let's go back. So let's take a deep breath and go back to reality, right? This is still bad. We want this to be better. We want this to be better. And in 15 minutes, I bet we can do something here, right? Whew, let me take a sip. There's stuff I'm probably gonna do off camera here to figure out, right? Like, and this is where you need to think about breaking changes and everything else, right? Like, does this constitute a breaking change JSON serializable? We'll get to that later. Let's just get something working. Let me go in here and add a couple more things. I'm actually gonna add, let's add param runtime type. I don't actually know what's implemented on the constructor. I'm gonna do param.type 2. Like, what's the actual type? The type of that param, and it prints it there, but I want to know for sure. So we're rerunning our build with our new printouts. Yay for printf debugging. And again, there are some tricks, and maybe later I can do this, is where you actually debug the builder within IntelliJ and set breakpoints. And that might be faster, but then you have to stop it and restart. This is what I do. This should have printed more because I did all that, right? I told it to print a few things. I didn't print any of them. That makes me sad. Let me just kick the builder. Let's see if it'll actually restart. And we'll see what happens. And I think I have to go get my daughter registered for school next year and some other stuff. So I'm going to have to get off here in about 12 minutes. There we go. Default field former parameter element impl. So this might just be interesting to do, right? So if we go in here and we see what type is param. Param, parameter element. Okay. If I go and open this crazy guy, I pasted in, hit O, Command O in IntelliJ to open it, and I see some other stuff. Ooh, what's this thing? Let's go look at that. Parameter element impl. Implements field former parameter. No, that's that. Parameter element, it's parameter element. Okay, so there's nothing. Sometimes you see is named, is optional, is positional, parameter kind. Sometimes you see things here that are like more useful. I'm just cracking the. I'm just looking at what autocomplete gives me, and just parameter element. But sometimes you can figure out, oh, like the parameter maybe there's maybe all parameters with default values are a different type. It actually looks like they are, right? They're this default field formal, but it's an impl class, which means it's not public. I think we'll be good with this. We'll see. But let's just do a very simple case here, right? So like let's say if param, okay, let's do param type equals param.type. And you'll see why I did this in a second, because I want to, but I can do if param type is bool, dark core bool. Aha, that's good. Else, or maybe I'll just keep printing everything. Have it. What do I want to do here? Well, I know it's a string value coming across the wire. So I think what I can do here is I can do param default value map of param.name equals bool dot. Oops. Is there like a bool dot parts? Nope. I know it's a bool, which means I can do equals param dot. And this is like, do I do a switch statement to be really paranoid? But I think, yeah, I'm going to. I have to. I have to. You have to. I'm going to do a final bool. Oops, sorry. Bool value is that. I'm going to do switch on param type param dot default value code. This is just to be defensive, folks. True. Value equals true. Break. Case. False. I'm being crazy paranoid here, but I think it's a good false. Oops. False. Break. Fault. Throw, and just it's slightly lazy, but at least if this ever gets thrown, I'll find out. And look at this. This is definite assignment analysis. It knows that in every path here, value is defined or it throws. So look at this. If I get rid of this guy, this is fun. Get rid of this guy, watch. Boom. Must be assigned. But now it knows in every case it's either assigned or a throw happens. And it works. So look, is my build still running? It is. Guess what, friends? Fingers crossed. We'll go back. We'll look. We'll wait for everything else to build. It's going slow. Boom. We got it. And guess what? Else if param type dot is dart int. All right. Oh, you can't do an else if. Guess what? You can't do an else if on the switch. I can now do, if it's an int, I can do final value equals int dot parse. I'm going to try parse because this should just work. Param dot default value code. And we know that it has a default value, so this shouldn't be null. And then I can go in here and I can say parameter default value map param dot name equals value. And guess what? And it's going to take a second here. There's our output. That happens every time. Refresh. Boom, look. So now we support doubles and integers and booleans, and it works. Whew, didn't that feel great? Didn't that feel good? Now string is funky, because look, string, and this is, I think I understand now why they did it this way, because it's easier just to pass this along. This is nuts. I can't just put this in the map. I need to put the evaluation of this in the map. And this is, again, where we have some fun. Let's go back to our thing here. I wonder if I go in here and I do R. Let's say that's my value. This should be rebuilt really fast because it's just local. Oops, let's go to our printout, sorry. String. There you go. So that's the value. It's literally the text that you type in is what gets shown up. And so what I have to do, so yeah, and this is where you just, it gets a little nuts. So one thing I could do here, and this is where you end up creating some craziness, right? My thought is I will only want to do things that are literals. What I could create is a package internal class that is string literal, and it's my own class that takes in a string value, that's this value. And then in the code I have that goes out and writes default values, wherever that is. So actually, well, yeah, while we're here. Okay, this is my last thing I got to do, 5 minutes. So hopefully everyone, if you followed along, if you follow along this far, hi Eric. Now it's really pressure. I have a director watching me. If you followed along this long, you'll want to rewind because it makes no sense. But let's go support string right now. But again, I will put this somewhere better when I'm ready to review. But for now, let us do class string literal impl. I'll make it really clear that it shouldn't leak. And then what I'm going to do is do a final string literal is the value, and I'll do string literal impl. That's all that is. I'll go up to this code. Where'd it go? Here. Else if param type dot is string. And you wonder, see, I see this line repeated so many times. Maybe I should do this differently. Yeah, I can do this in a function and just return the value or throw, not supported. Yeah. But we'll do it this way. Param default value code. Oops. Bang, because we assume that it's already. You're starting to see some places here like, oh, clearly I should pull that out before, but whatever. Okay. Okay, yeah, some stuff got weird here. So actually, just while I'm doing this, because I'm gonna pull this out here. Final default value code equals this, bang. You see the same value over and over and over. It's like let's just do it one place. Oops. Let's just do it once. And then you get this nice, we know it's not null. Yes, we know it's not null. So let's run our thing here a bit. And now this is, again, where we need to be super careful, because now we're adding complexity. And again, this is what I talk about features. So what do you want to do? Do I want to do the work to decode, to evaluate that string literal in context here, or find some code that does it and actually store the string value? That sounds nuts. And what I know is, at the end of the day, all I'm going to do is dump out the text anyway. I know it's a valid string. So here you go. So I'm now getting, yes, this is perfect. So now I know I have some code somewhere that takes that default value and just dumps it. And clearly, this is not valid output, and the Dart formatter is now screaming at me. So guess what? If I go down to this guy, and I go string to string, let's see what happens. And this is great, because that means I don't have to go find the code and add a special case for string little impl. In fact, boom, that's what we want. So that means I can go into, let's play silly Git tricks. If I go in here and just change this code, string, and hit save, see, it's that. Ah, boom, my diff disappeared, which is exactly what I wanted. That means I am now generating the code completely that maps to my goal. This is what I wanted to do, right? I wanted to generate this code. There's no diff, which means it works. And so even better is I can go back to my, where was I just at? JSON utils, src utils. I come to this guy, and I can make him private. Sweet. And I can get rid of this print, which is great. And so what I actually want to probably do now, this is, and again, this is just kind of how I turn the crank, right? Is what I want to do is I want to have a function now. Yeah, I'll do object question mark. Default value for constructor param. Sure. I don't know what it's going to do yet. What I do know, though, is I basically want, if I have a default constructor, and the reason I'm putting it in here is because I want to populate the map in a loop. And I hate key statements. I hate breaks in key statements. It's basically what I do. I hate, yeah. So I'm going to put in a constructor element. There we go. Default CQR. Yes. And then I can do, wait, do I need name? For each param. No, that's good. Yeah. No, I can get rid of that too. Really what I want is I want a parameter element. Yes. And I will return I just think this is way easy to read. There's a bunch of religion around. Do you have multiple returns in a function or not? Oh. Excuse me. Okay, and then there's a couple options. What I'm probably doing now is log, yeah. Warning. Good, not. I don't know if I want to do that. Let's just keep it not so noisy. Just turn no. Yeah, maybe for debugging later I'll do that. But now I get this wonderful thing where I can get rid of all this crazy code. And so what I can do is I can go final value equals default value for param if value equals null param default map of what is it? Field that name? Param name equals value. And we'll see if this builds. So this is the crazy thing, right? We did all this work to dig in to find the JSON key, JSON config, where is it written, where it overrode the default value. And now it's back. Now we have this logic, which is how crazy do you want this to be? We have this. In fact, I can even go here. Let's make this better. Turn true. Turn false. Better. Sure, we can do this. We start out with someone wanted this crazy feature to find the default value and the argument do the right thing, and now we've just sugared it down to how smart can I make this function? So integers and doubles and strings and bools are easy. Enums, if all I get is a string, again, this might be where I need to talk to the analyzer team or something. If I get an enum in here, I might be able to figure that out. And in fact, maybe it'll be even easier because if the enum value, okay. So forget all, and this is what you do. So it's building now. Still 4 people watching, and I have a little 5 minutes over. Let's see if this builds. And now I can turn it into a complete user issue. First, let's make sure that the generator is doing what we want. That seems like good code. All my friends. So let's go in to this guy. And we have all these other types in here. This actually is going to end up, I think it's going to work, and this is just hilarious. And I spent all the time. So I spent all this time like, oh, I need to parse this and do all, and here, jump in the comments. Do you know where I'm going here? I might have just solved my problem for me. And that'll be really nice. Let's go into my, where's my implicit default value thing? There you are. Let's add in field bool, field string, field double. Let's just add all of these. Let's just add them all. Let's give it all. Okay. Let's keep some of the stuff there for a second. Let's import this. That's good. Let's import that guy. What's this meta? Must be initialized. You're right. These must be initialized. So let us initialize them. So cool. Const. Anyone chiming in yet? That's what I'm curious. The 4 people watching. Does anyone have a guess where we're going here? This dot field map empty. Field map empty equals that. No one's guessing. It's gonna be fun. Oh. Field set empty. I probably need to type because in types are inferred. Thank you. Inference. This dot field list simple equals const of comma 2, comma 3. We're almost there. This dot field set simple equals. Anyone's chiming in? I'm waiting for someone to chime in. Or the 4 people just, went to make a sandwich. This dot field map simple. I haven't done that yet, right? Const that. Okay. Gotta do 42, guys. We're almost there. This dot. What is this? Field map list equals that. Const. And finally, this dot field enum equals Greek.beta. So we don't want these here because that just ruined their whole thing. I was joking with someone, like, you remember editors before you could do multi-line edit? And they're like, do you remember editors before you could do copy and paste, Okay, so that's done. This test should fail. So let's go run the test now. Run test. It should fail now, right? Yep. And for other reasons, right? But we know that, our code here, all the stuff in here that doesn't handle the right thing. So this is where I'm laughing. I did this fun thing, right? Guess what? I'm pretty sure that will just work for everything. We're only calling this the params that have default values. Yeah. So in fact, I'm pretty sure, and I've saved the code, I'm pretty sure I don't need any of this either. In fact, I'm pretty sure I don't need that. And yeah, I think that's all I need. So if I go save that and run it, I probably should, let me just commit that there. So I've now committed the generated code, or I've staged it at least, right? And it's not doing the right thing with values. There you go. So it inlines the const. It just copies and pastes the code. It literally copies and pastes the code, which is exactly what you want. Because if it's a valid Yes, Eric, we're fixing a bug in JSON serializable. We're fixing bug, I forget the name of it. Bug 1796. You have to rewind to see the whole story. So I did all this crazy stuff. So guess what? I can just do this. And I can go into here. Where did this go? That's called here. And I can get rid of... I can do... in fact, we know it always has to have a default constructor, because otherwise JSON serializable fails. I can do actually here. Default constructor equals null, question mark, it's empty. Otherwise, it is a map of string to object from. Let's do, I always like from entries. From entries of map. Let's see if this is where my guys are thinking big screen. Map entry. There we go. E dot name, and then string literal impl of E dot default value code. Bang. Oops, not the test. Actually, yeah, the test. So that works, right? I just need to fill the default values there. So now we're building our output. Now we're testing, generating our code. Look how simple that ended up being. That's really small. If I build it to finish building, I'm way past my time. It succeeded. Boom. So this is the bananas part. It ended up being what? The code we actually had to change in utils, 20 lines of code with this little throwaway class. That's about it. We had to pass in some defaults here. I had created my little utility here for my params, a default type. But I should now be able to go into my implicit default test. I can go into this guy. I can grab all of these test things that were from somewhere else. Run my test, and it passes. So now we have JSON serializable set up so that if you do not have a default value set in your JSON key, we will grab it from the constructor. If you have named constructor arguments that have default values, you'll grab it from there. And now the even crazier part is like, oh, okay, well now we need to test it with other kind of crazy constructor argument types. Will that work in every case? I think just the string will work, because if it's a valid Dart literal in your constructor definition, since we're defining it in the same class, it should be a valid literal in this helper. But who knows? I don't know. Maybe you can. And this is all the stuff you need to think about. This gets crazy. What if I define a default? Actually, here's a great. This would be great. Let's see if this works. So this is the stuff you think about, and you have to think about. So what if I go in here and I grab my default, the field default value, and watch this. If I go in here and I do static const field default value equals that, that's fine. This is all the stuff you have to, so this, I thought I was clever, right? Oh yeah, just plug it in there. That's fine. The builder's going to run. In fact, it already ran and it finished. Guess what? That's not valid because we're not in the class. And then you ask yourself, oh, is that something I even want to consider? I can't, if it's just a string, I can't do anything about that, right? I can't, like, unless I want to inspect the string or something else, right? Is that okay? Will people understand? I'll definitely get bugs about that. People will get complaining. Maybe people don't do that. Maybe people will just do. Maybe I'll just explain if people hit that, right? Like, oh well, you can't use a field in your class, a static const field. But that's it. But so that's the stuff you got to think about in terms of testing and everything else. So what I'll likely do now, this seems okay, is then I need to do soul searching. Like, does this seem like a breaking change? And all the tests I have in JSON serializable here, this didn't change any generated code. I know that I just did work on build CLI, where effectively I did this all over. I basically had to hardwire my defaults everywhere. And I can just get rid of that code now with this. But this could be a breaking change for folks, right? Because what this is doing now is it's going to populate the default value. I might not have required, there might not be a required argument. I might have a non-required parameter where they want, if I'm calling the constructor normally, they want a default value if it's omitted, but they've already set it up and they have a certain world set up where they expect null to come in from JSON. I'm going to break behavior here. And so do I want to deal with a breaking change to JSON serializable and everything that means, right? I'll need to figure that out. But at least I have a solution. So I've been streaming for a long time. I'm tired. I need to go do live stuff. But I hope everyone had fun watching. It was kind of fun to do for 2 hours. Let me know if you want me to do it again. And have a great weekend, folks. Hugs from the guest room.